The next big challenge, Build Back Better, the nearly $2 trillion bill, which focuses money towards child care and elder care, is passed out of the House. It will face more of an uphill battle in the Senate. First off, what would you consider the biggest highlights of the plan for people here?
So I would say there are a few things that are really important in this Build Back Better Act, and this is really a focus on what I call the human services or human infrastructure. So one thing it's going to do is lower the cost of prescription drugs, and it will cap insulin at $35 a month. Another thing it's going to do is focus on paid family leave, which we know is incredibly important, and also address the caregiving infrastructure. Over 2 million women are not part of the workforce anymore because of the pandemic, and one of the biggest barriers to women getting back in the workforce is lack of caregiving. And that's care for our youngest, it's care for our eldest, and it's care for people who are caring for disabled relatives. And so we want to make sure that the Build Back Better plan addresses paid family leave, capping insulin, and ensuring that we're doing what we can to make sure that this economic recovery is inclusive.
The bill also, oh, keep going.
No, and then also, too, the importance of addressing affordable housing and housing. There's $150 billion in the Build Back Better Act to address housing. And we know that in Washington state, especially up and down the I-5 corridor, we have a housing shortage and families are rent burdened, which means that they're paying more than 30% of their income on housing. And so anything we can do to provide housing vouchers, but also recognizing that we have a supply problem. The population is growing and we just don't have enough housing to meet the demand.
Congresswoman, talk a little more specifically about our affordable housing crisis in the Pacific Northwest, the Puget Sound region, which you know so well.
Yeah, so, even back during my time as mayor of Tacoma, we knew that we started having a housing crunch. The Puget Sound region is a very desirable place to live, and more people are moving here every week. And even in the South Puget Sound, down in Tacoma and Olympia, Tumwater, and Puyallup, and even University Place, we know that we just do not simply have the supply to meet the demand. And so we're doing what we can to incentivize developers to build more housing. We want to provide vouchers for families looking for housing, but we must do what we can to increase the supply. And that includes, low-income housing tax vouchers to incentivize more low-income housing being built. Just using every tool at our disposal to increase the supply, which is not keeping up with the needs of the people in the Northwest.
Inflation, a huge issue impacting people here, paying more at the grocery store, the gas pump, paying more for Christmas presents. What do you say to people who worry pumping even more federal money into the economy will only make the inflation issue worse?
Well, what's good about the Build Back Better plan is that it's fully paid for, so we're not printing money. And so what we're doing is we're increasing the child income tax credit, we're getting cash into people's hands, and we know that right now, because unemployment is low, wages are up, and people are doing better, that there's just more pent-up demand. A lot of people are shopping online now, and that is having a crunch with the supply chain. And so as we look at the long-term prospects, this will not have a negative impact on inflation. Getting cash into people's hands has no downside.
You've recently sponsored a bill to help service members whose families are facing fertility issues. How would that work?
So, right now, if you are a member of the military, TRICARE is how you get your coverage. And we want to make sure that TRICARE is covering treatments that families need to make sure that they're able to conceive and to have a family. And so that's really what we're trying to do, make sure that TRICARE covers services that people need to address fertility issues.
Earlier this morning, a 17 and a 2-year-old were shot in Tukwila. This is just the latest in a string of pretty stunning gun violence incidents involving younger people in Western Washington. Is there anything in the works in Congress right now to curb gun violence or improve overall feeling like communities are less safe?
Well, it is always tragic when a family has to address gun violence, and no family should have to go through this, and it feels as though it's just more commonplace every day. The House did pass universal background checks and common sense gun laws, so it's now in the Senate. And the thing I think that's so important to recognize in this, Molly, is that this is popular legislation. The vast majority of the general public approves universal background checks, including gun owners. So there's really no good reason for us, at a minimum, to not have that standard at the federal level.
We are quickly closing in on 2 years of this pandemic. How do you feel the U.S. response has gone, and are we more prepared for the next one?
So, it's hard to imagine that now this is year 2 of the pandemic. And I think that when it first started, we all thought this would last for a couple months and we'd resume our normal activities. And sadly, this has dragged on for a long time. When the pandemic first hit, there was a complete lack of leadership at the federal level at the White House. But now that President Biden is here, we've got more vaccines produced. We are wearing masks, and we're doing everything we can to protect ourselves. We know that statistically, the people who end up in the hospital and sadly dying, the vast majority of them have one thing in common: they're not vaccinated. So we will continue to produce as many vaccines as possible, encourage people to get them, ask folks to mask up when they're in public, especially during the holiday season when people are gathering, and just doing everything we can to not just protect ourselves, but to protect each other. That's what's so important here.
Congresswoman, is there anything else you'd like your District 10 constituents or our viewers to know?
You know, I would say this, it has been a trying time for us for the past 2 years. Students are in school, parents are grappling with daycare. We're doing everything we can for an economic recovery, and we just want to make sure that people understand that the Democrats in the House have been working hard every day for a recovery that is equitable. We want to create more jobs. We want people to have financial security, and overall, our message is very simple. We want a nation that is safe, that is just, and that is secure. And every policy that we're working on is around safety, housing security, economic security, taking care of each other, and making sure that we have a caregiving infrastructure that allows everyone to participate in this recovery.
Representative Strickland, thank you so much for joining us for KOMO's Connect to Congress.